channel Sharaglas Hisan Zalmayim Ta my Iman YouTube channel.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the second episode of The Rise and Fall of the Great Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. This is the second episode of Rise and Fall of the Great Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. In the first episode of this series, we have narrated the rapid victories of the Taliban movement beginning from the rise till the conquest of Kabul. This episode will narrate the rest of Taliban's progress as well as governance, security, rehabilitation, and other relevant aspects. Post-conquest situation of the northern provinces. Irresponsible armed men of warlords used to oppress the residents of Parwan and Kapisa. Therefore, the people helped Taliban to take control of both provinces without any considerable resistance on 3rd of September 1996. This victory was subsequent to the conquest of Kabul. People of Parwan and Kapisa warmly welcomed the Taliban, and hundreds of their youths voluntarily joined the Taliban movement. Taliban instantly installed Sharia law and appointed the authorities to lead and manage public and military affairs. Khinjan Agreement. After the conquest of Kabul and its neighboring regions, warlords militia fled to the northern region of the country, where General Abdurrashid Dostum and Ahmad Shah Massoud were settled. Dostum and Massoud had already fought each other and had killed thousands of each other's warriors. However, these communists and hypocrites formed a unified ambush, so they could maintain their power to further subjugate civilians and get tribute from their foreign lords. Massoud, Karim Khalili, and Dostum signed an agreement in Khinjan, which titled Homeland Defense, and aimed to jointly fight against Taliban under the leadership of Dostum. This agreement was actually made based on the order of KGB and CIA agents, so they could avoid the progress of Taliban. Soon after the agreement, 3,000 militias of Dostum attacked Taliban. It was followed by another attack of Massoud's militia. These consecutive attacks forced Taliban to step back to Hasinkot Mountains and form a strong defense line there. On 21st of December, the Taliban launched general operations, which resulted severe casualties to the rebel militias. The rebels fled and left behind their tanks and artillery in Khinjan. They crossed Salong and exploded the tunnel, so they could not be followed by the Taliban. Militia of Hizb Wahdat also fled to Bamyan. Parwan and Kapisa were completely conquered. Gorband, Surkh Parsa, Turkmen Valley, and Shaibar were also captured. The security was ensured and the officials were appointed. On the other hand, after Ismail Khan has escaped to Iran, some of his ex-friends and his subordinates took advantage of the opportunity and started capturing local areas. Fighters of Rasul Pahlawan took over on Badaghis province and looted everything that they encountered, though Pahlawan's fighters took control of several parts of Badaghis. A Taliban commander was still in charge of the capital of the Badaghis. As soon as the insurgents settled their fighters in Balamurghab, they started torturing and ambushing Pashtuns. The insurgents were based and were fighting based on ethnic identities, so people came to Taliban and requested them to free their residential areas from the rebel hoodlums. Therefore, on 25th of October, the Taliban attacked the enemy. The battle was very successful because Mujahideen scattered insurgents' defense lines, captured after 2,000 of them, gained a great number of weapons, and conquered Badaghis completely. General Malik's betrayal. General Malik, who led fighters in Faryab, was an inferior commander of Dostum. When Taliban conquered Badaghis, Ismail Khan fled to Faryab. General Malik arrested him and handed over him to Taliban. Besides that, he also promised to surrender Faryab, Balkh, and Juzjan provinces. As the Taliban were very keen to stabilize the situation without bloodshed, they trusted General Malik and sent an unarmed group of Taliban led by Maulavi Ihsanullah to transform the power in the above-mentioned provinces. The Taliban settled in the provinces and peacefully started to operate as a government body. However, General Malik showed his betrayal and trapped the optimistic Taliban fighters in his conspiracy. He attacked the Taliban and murdered 8,000 Taliban forces. The conquest of Baghlan. After Malik had betrayed Taliban in Mazar and other provinces, a small group of Taliban, nearly 1,500 fighters, were assigned by Commander Bacha to pass Salang Tunnel and get Baghlan. The evil insurgent fighter tried to disarm the Taliban forces, but Commander Dadullah, who was also among the Taliban in Baghlan, warned them that they would keep their fingers touched with the triggers till the last drop of their blood. Simultaneously, Masud attacked Kunduz and forced commanders Arif Khan, Mirza Nasir, and Amir Arab Hassan to withdraw Kunduz and get back to Baghlan. These commanders and the other 1,500 Taliban forces led by Dadullah assembled and decided to recapture Kunduz. Fortunately, the attack resulted expectedly and caused the conquest of Kunduz. Commander Arif Khan was appointed as the governor of Kunduz. Then the airport of Kunduz was also captured, which facilitated the arrival of further fresh forces from Kabul. After that, Taliban attacked and conquered Tashqargan. Then the power in these regions was exchanged several times between Taliban and warlord militia. During the last 2 years, warlord militia were increasingly weakened, and the people continually condemned them. On 28th of June 1998, Taliban attacked warlords militia from Ghormach. Their defense line was destroyed and forced to leave hundreds of light and heavy weapons behind. Taliban recaptured Almar and Kaisar districts and kept going forward until 12th of July. Faryab was completely freed. Hundreds of Faryab yachts joined the Taliban. Security was stabilized and the authorities were appointed. Taliban has already suppressed Dostum militia several times. In addition to that, they were further weakened in Jozjan. Finally, on 21st of August, Taliban attacked Antkhoy and severely defeated the thugs. Subsequently, Jozjan was also conquered. Dostum put fire on military depots and then fled to Mazar. The residents of Jozjan, like the residents of any other conquered provinces, warmly welcomed Taliban, and the Taliban ensured their security and appointed authorities to shoulder the responsibilities. Taliban transformed the corpse of the Shtilaylia martyrs to Kandahar. Then Mujahideen turned towards Saripol, which was under control of Ghafar Palawan. Ghafar Palawan usually oppressed people and looted their wealth and dignities. On 24th of August, Saripol was conquered and the fugitive militia fighters were arrested and unarmed. People of Saripol felt the happiness of being freed from the oppression of warlords. They joined the Taliban. The Taliban safeguarded security, implemented Sharia law, and appointed authorities. The force couldn't rest because of the fragile situation of the people under the oppression of warlords. Therefore, they started moving towards Balkh. The residents of Balkh city were waiting for their arrival, and finally, on 8th of August, Balkh was also annexed, with the lands freed from warlords. As militias of Hizb Wahdat was supported by Iranians and they used to oppress people, as soon as the Taliban arrived in Balkh, people executed the Iranian spies. Consequently, Iranians marched their army to the border of Afghanistan. In reaction to that, the supreme leader Mullah Muhammad Umar Mujahid sent a group of Taliban to warn the Iranians and to tell them to be careful. Otherwise, he would not have stopped until stepping into Isfahan. This warning statement of the great Umar is still noted as a golden line in Afghan history. Iranians could easily foresee the consequence of war with Taliban. Therefore, they stopped and returned to their own places. After Mazar, the Taliban turned toward Kayan. Militia fighters in Kayan were equipped by Soviet. They had already emplaced hundreds of bombs along the entrance road of Kayan, so it was very difficult to get Kayan under control. However, by Allah's mercy, Taliban could overcome Kayan Valley on first day of September, and the warlord thugs fled to Panjshir. Moreover, Shia fighters in Bamiyan were engaged in war with each other, which was resulting severe casualties to the ordinary people of Shia sect. Therefore, Taliban entered Saigon and Kohimar districts of Bamiyan on 19th of September. Bamiyan was subsequently conquered and security was stabilized. Fighters of Akbari, who was a commander of Hizb Wahdat, joined Taliban. Then Taliban faced toward Takhar. As the Taliban approached Takhar, warlords' followers exploded Bango Bridge, which was intended to avoid Taliban's progress. But the followers of Tariq ibn Ziyad could bravely cross Bangi River and could conquer Takhar on 10th of July. Taliban moved forward, crossed the Khwajagar district, and ambushed in Khwaja Bahauddin Hills, which forced the thugs to escape to Badakhshan and Tajikistan, and they settled close to Russian military bases. Security during Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. In order to defame Islamic value and to pave the ground for installing Najib's rotten power, Crusader, Jewish, and their puppet Afghan slaves use all their tools to oppress people under the title of Mujahideen, and then reflect those thugs as characters of Mujahideen and ultimate goals of jihad. But Alhamdulillah, our leader, the founder of Taliban movement, disclosed the true goal of jihad and the real outcome of implementation of Sharia law. By imposing Sharia law and hudud, the people observed that the only system that could maintain their right and bring security is Islamic system. The oppressors were handcuffed and the oppressed were defended. Rehabilitation during Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. As the Taliban movement was rooted deep into the promised and committed statums of the Afghan society, they wholeheartedly struggled to build Afghanistan. Despite the fact that the global trough of crusaders issued many economic and political restrictions on Taliban, and the Taliban themselves were also economically from the low class of the society. But they could manage the internal income and did many reconstruction projects. Reconstruction of governmental buildings. Majority of the governmental buildings have been damaged by the civil proxy war, but Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan immediately started their reconstruction. The new government reinstalled governmental body and functionalized all the public and military units by hiring the officials and employees, designing the rules and procedures, and ensuring the hierarchy of administrative operations. This was a great job at that time, which can only be weighted fairly by people who are expert of the field. Reforming education. The educational system in Afghanistan had been completely destroyed during the civil war. However, Islamic Emirate immediately started rebuilding that. The buildings of educational institutions were reconstructed, textbooks were printed, teachers and administrational staff's allowance were issued, and the educational system was resumed. Repairing electricity. During civil war, the warlords had targeted water, gas, electricity resources, and factories. Their construction had been either completely destroyed or severely damaged. Taliban, though governmental income was very limited, reconstructed Naglo, Kajaki, and Sarobi electrical dams. Electrical transformers and other equipments were installed, and the people were facilitated with electricity. Thus, the dams light up Kabul, Helmand, and Kandahar. Moreover, the factory of Nasaji was repaired and prepared to produce. The gas line was extended from Shabargan to Mazar. Kodiak chemical factory was reactivated. Coal mining of Karkar and Samangan, which could fulfill a part of economic needs of Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, were resumed. In addition, tens of international agreements were signed. Growth of private sector. The same like anything else, private sector had been suffered severe damage during anarchy. After security was ensured by Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, businessmen and merchants started rebuilding their factories. For instance, around hundreds of factories were reactivated and others were established in Hudkhel industrial area. The plastic factory of Jalalabad was repaired and started to produce. Spinzar factory of Kunduz was also repaired and activated. Consequently, a lot of needs of Afghans were met. Roads construction. Kabul-Jalalabad and Jalalabad-Turkham highways were repaired. In addition, Kabul-Gardez and Kabul-Ghazni highway were also repaired. The important transporting highway of Ghazni to Kabul was also repaired, and the fundamental construction of Spin-Boldak highway was ongoing. Kandahar-Herat, Herat-Torkham, and Kandahar city subways were either repaired or constructed fundamentally. Economic development. Pre-Islamic Emirate age was very vulnerable for businessmen because they had to give taxes passing tens of warlords checkpoints. Nevertheless, Islamic Emirate ensured their security and paved the ground for them to flourish. The government decreased taxes on raw industrial materials to the possible lowest level, so factories owners could easily import and produce at lower price. The individual and lower class businessmen in urban and rural areas were secured and assisted to grow swiftly. Constructing military compounds and equipment. Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan gathered majority of looted and damaged military equipment and settled them in Ministry of Defense. Moreover, military division of Jalalabad Airport, and Gardez Corps buildings were reconstructed. The military structure of Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan was similar to Ahmad Shah Baba's military formation. There were two kinds of military personnel. First, permanent personnel who voluntarily joined the army of Taliban, and second, the ordinary people who were obliged to spend a part of their life in military based on the governmental policy. The ordinary people who served in Ministry of Interior were not given salaries. They were only provided the basic needs. They assumed serving in military as an Islamic obligation and were consistent to follow the rules of Amir. Therefore, there was a strong bond between the government and the public. So the corruption was completely rooted out, and the security was turned a peace of mind for the people. Afghans still remained that as an example of ideal secure atmosphere in Afghanistan. Charity and welfare. Hundreds thousands of people had been disabled and murdered during warlords' anarchy. Millions of widows and orphans were suffered by severe poverty and drought. Furthermore, the economic restriction of the Crusader and the army of Satan further increased their suffering. Therefore, Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, in the framework of Ministry of Martyrs and Civil Affairs, registered the orphans and widows. They were provided monthly caches in food. Other poor people who were at a rather better economic situation were given foods with 50% discount. Constructing masajids. Pre-Islamic Emirate government and authorities had little got their attention to the religious places like masajids. Therefore, as 99% people of Afghanistan are Muslims and are very committed to the Islamic values, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan had built lots of masajids in different major cities. Water supplies, electricity facilities, and other services that were needed for ablutions and prayers were all set up, so Muslims can perform their prayers and do their worship easily and comfortably. The great work can be mentioned repairing of Bulicharhi Masjid and the construction of Kandahar Idgah Masjid, Crusaders and Iranians' joint plan. One day, a truck loaded with oil barrels stopped close to the home of the great leader Mullah Muhammad Umar Mujahid in the afternoon of August 1998. Its driver disappeared himself. The local Taliban came close to the truck and found out that the keys were still inside the switch. They tried to switch on the truck, but turning the keys resulted a big explosion. It was a big explosion, but fortunately, Amirul Mu'minin was himself not in his home. However, his wife, two of his brothers, Abdul Salam and Abdul Khaliq, 10 high-rank Taliban officials, and one Arab Mujahid were murdered, and 30 others got injuries. Though it had big casualty, still the enemy of Allah could not achieve their target. The invasion of Afghanistan by Crusaders and other corrupt nations. Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan freed 95% land from evil and corruption, and secured Afghans from oppression and abuse of warlords, thugs, and foreign proxy agents. In addition, Islamic system was installed and was famous for its uniqueness in the world. Muslims around the world saw it as the land of peace. Therefore, majority of Muslims who were forced to leave their homelands just for being actual Muslims settled in Afghanistan. Based on Islamic values and following the principle of Islamic brotherhood, Islamic Emirate showed solidarity with them and welcomed them to Afghanistan. Thus, Crusaders and liberals decided to destroy the safe haven of Muslims and to give message to all Muslims that they would not find a safe haven until they have not surrendered their wills to the wills of West. At the same time, Muslims around the world who were suffered too much from American occupation and oppression attacked twin towns located in New York. Americans, without any proof to justify their claims, accused foreign Muslims who were living in Afghanistan, specifically the great Mujahid Osama bin Laden. Americans called on Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan to hand over the accused person. Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan referred the issue to the Council of Scholars. The Council of Religious Ulama and Scholars rejected handing over Muslim brothers to infidels, based on the Islamic teaching and lack of any justifiable document and proofs. Moreover, Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan considered itself responsible for defend the rights of all Muslims against crusaders. Therefore, as all conspiracies of the Westerners had been already dismantled, because the thugs warlords had been exhausted, their spies had forced to flee, and dollars could not satisfy the authorities to be puppets anymore. They had not any other option unless to militarily invade Afghan nation. Consequently, crusaders from around the world jointly attacked Afghanistan on 7th of October 2001. Crusaders were accompanied by their ex-puppet Afghan warlords, I.E.A, General Malik, General Dostam, Khalili, Pacha Khan Zadran, Gul Agha Sherzai, Haji Qadir, Hazrat Ali, Haji Zaman, Ismail Khan, Naib Zada, Muhaqqiq, and other similar warlords and thugs. They entered Afghanistan under the flag and military support of the West Crusaders. Crusaders met in Bonn and decided to assemble all the thugs and warlords who had enough experience in how to oppress, loot, and sell people and their values. These hateful figures could not best fulfill Crusaders' mission in Afghanistan because they were not bound to any religious and humanistic values and ethics. Crusaders signed military agreements with Pakistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan, and other puppet governments which enabled Crusaders to pass their airspace and start their airstrikes on Afghanistan. The lands of those countries were used against a legal state of Afghan nation. Though airstrikes were very heavy, forces of Islamic Emirate showed a significant resistance. Therefore, the Afghan thugs requested Americans to overweight the bombs and further increase the airstrikes. Taliban left Kabul on 8th of November. Then, on November 24th, after showing a good example of velocity to defend the people, Taliban and Kunduz decided to surrender. These detainees were horribly executed. Rest of the Taliban left urban areas and guarded the mountains to further pursue the way of jihad. Consecutively, on 5th of December 2001, an administration was formed in Bonn, Germany. The new administration led by Hamid Karzai was transformed to Kabul, so they can justify that the new administration is an Afghan-led government. Could Crusaders succeed to do sabotage and espionage operations in the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan? As Crusaders are very well versed in corruption and subversion, they could instrumentalize their puppet figures to demoralize Mujahideen. Abdul Samad Khaksar, who was Deputy of Interior Ministry of Islamic Emirate and had secret ties with the Crusaders, emphasized the government to withdraw cities. As soon as the government felt he joined the Crusaders, later on he was arrested in Jari district of Kandahar and was sentenced to death by the Taliban authorities. Furthermore, Taliban figures such as Arsalan Rahmani and others debated and joined Karzai's administration. After that, in order to weaken Taliban's military forces, they trapped Akbar Agha, Mu'tasim Agha Jan and others. They defeated Islamic Emirate and shouldered the American flag. However, this, like any other attempts of Crusaders, could not weaken the morality of Mujahideen. Later on, Crusaders used some of other Taliban members such as Mullah Muhammad Rasul and Mullah Manan to split Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, but they also couldn't achieve their goal. Despite all these enemies and their conspiracies, till the last breath of American puppet and corrupted installed administration, Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan had control over 80% land of Afghanistan. Officials were appointed, public affairs were led, Sharia was implemented in all territories under the control of Islamic Emirate, Despite their repeated claims of progress, America and its allies are made to kneel down and request peace talks. Crusaders could only predict defeat as their destination in Afghanistan, so they confessed their defeat on 3rd of July 2015. On 23rd of April 2013, Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan announced the death of the great leader Mullah Muhammad Umar Mujahid. The leader had already passed away 2 years before of the announce, but Crusaders, despite all their intelligence capability, could not notify. Consecutively, the Leadership Council of Ulama appointed Mullah Akhtar Muhammad Mansur as the leader of Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. Under his leadership, Mujahideen could conduct very successful and high-profile attacks on the Crusaders. However, Taqdeer of Allah Almighty could not be changed, so Amirul Mu'minin was murdered in an airstrike of Crusaders. The drops of his blood watered and nurtured the roots of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan to be further stable and committed for its mission.